Tuesday evening before a day off for a lot of us. My name is Arlene Dausmang-Poil, and I'll be your facilitator slash host for tonight. This is our second virtual event for the Daly City Arts and Culture Commission. So before we begin, maybe if we can start recording, is that going to happen?
Cello has started.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so now that we're recording, let's begin. I would like to pause and acknowledge that Daly City, California, sits on the land of the Ohlone people. We remember their continued connection to this region and give thanks to them for allowing us to live, work, learn, and pray on their traditional homeland. We offer our respect to their elders and to all Ohlone people of the past, present, and future. I would like to introduce our Daly City Arts and Culture Commissioners. Just wave hi to the screen when I call your name. I am Arlene. I'm the chair for the Daly City Arts and Culture Commission. Our vice chair is Commissioner Nancy Rodriguez. We have Commissioner Elizabeth Espinda, Commissioner Dory Paniza, Commissioner Joanne Boston, and of course our Daly City staff and support team, Leilani Ramos and Stephen Stolte. I think we are missing Pam and Roderick, but they will be joining us soon. Dr. Rod Dausmang-Poil, our council person, and also our other council person, Pam Giovanni. So our Daly City Artist Dialogue, right, is a way for us to learn from local, national, and global artists who will give us multiple approaches and perspectives of art and culture. Tonight we feature Kimberly Arteche. Kimberly Arteche, they, is an educator, cultural worker, and interdisciplinary artist. Arteche is committed to collaboratively creating decolonial practices within arts institutions while creating visibility and providing resources for emerging Asian, Pacific American, and BIPOC artists. She is currently teaching photography at San Francisco State University and is the co-founder and program manager for Ballet Creative. So tonight we'll feature Fine Art for the People. And she asked, why have art and museums historically felt inaccessible for working class communities? Today, Kim will discuss how white supremacy, Eurocentrism in art history, and capitalism have influenced the class divide in art institutions and how communities are changing the game to make art for the people. Please welcome Kim Arteche. Hi, Kim.
Hi, everyone. Wow, I'm so honored to be speaking with all of you. I see so much of my community from all of my different communities here in this Zoom room, and just really excited to be back in community with Daly City. Daly City was the first city that I moved to when I moved out to SF State for graduate school from the East Coast. And so Daly City always has a sweet spot in my heart in terms of like thinking about the Bay Area as home. And yeah, thank you so much for having me today. So like Arlene mentioned, we're talking about fine art for the people. This first slide that I have here is a mural entitled Calling Our Ancestors by the Trust Your Struggle Collective, which was completed in 2015. They're an amazing group of artists and muralists who do community-based projects all across the US. And so a little bit about myself, I come from a family of immigrants. Like I mentioned, my home where I had grown up on Piscataway land, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. These are my parents when they first started dating in DC. And my whole artistic practice is really about reconnecting with the stories that were lost in my family's history due to assimilation, the stories that we had shed to be able to survive in this world, to be able to honor all of the ancestors whose names aren't spoken every day, and to be able to like collectively reclaim all of these histories. And also understanding that this history in my family is deeply connected to a history of all Filipinx immigrant families and all immigrant families here in the US. And so to talk a little bit about some of the artistic projects to kind of outline what this looks like for you all, one of my favorite projects that I have worked on is called the Lola Project, where I was in residence at the Undiscovered Creative Night Markets in Soma, Pilipinas, where I asked all folks who felt willing to participate to share stories about their grandmothers. And so in this photo, I have Kalia and Kadeen who are sharing their stories, and I'll read this to you. And their Lola's name is Lola Julita. And what they shared is, my Lola used to smoke a cigarette on both ends. Her daughters told her to stop. Later, she got addicted to M&Ms, which she called, I miss her. And that was from Helen, their mom. And then Kalia writes, my Lola gives me cookies and makes me watch TV. And then Kadeen says, my Lola babysits us. She takes good care of us. And Helen also writes, Kadeen and Kalia are still lucky to spend time with Lola, right? And so this project was really about collectively engaging our memory. You know, like I mentioned, it's the stories that we don't get to talk about all the time, every day, because we are so busy working. We are so busy, you know, making lives for ourselves, right? And so one of the most fun parts of this project was I was able to collaborate with an all Asian American female sketch comedy troupe called the Granny Cart Gangstas, and they dressed up as grandmothers, and they kind of like walked around the night market, acting like sweet, kind of maybe even bustos, maybe like harassing folks, giving out crackers, giving out Vicks to people, and kind of re-engaging the spirit of our like Filipino immigrant grandmothers all over the space. Another recent project that I worked on last year during Dia de los Muertos was a collective community altar in honor of Don Mabalon. And in this photo, we have Jessie here, Don's widow. And so I worked with Dara del Rosario and with the rest of the community to collect artwork and books and stories and poetry, to have a space to honor Don, which by this installation last year was about 1 year from her passing previously. One of my most favorite projects that I worked on when I was on the curatorial council at Southern Exposure was an all POC uh, photography showcase. And so every year, Southern Exposure, which is a small nonprofit arts gallery in the Mission, hosts a juried showcase. And, you know, one of the things that we're always brought in as curators, as artists of color, is how do we diversify? How do we make these programs more inclusive? And my first program was like, well, what if we just focus on what photographers of color want to see? And this was the first time that this had happened, where it was all POC artist showcase. And it definitely like caused some friction. Some people were definitely not happy about it, but I feel in different ways that it set off, you know, a different trajectory for the organization. Another project that I was able to work on was an exhibition called Love Aswang. And so if folks are familiar with Filipinx culture and Philippine culture and mythology, the Aswang is a shape-shifting creature that might be a dog during the day or a monster at night or different things. And so I took the mythology of the Aswang and applied it to my own experiences as an artist of color, especially considering how, as an artist of color who is trained within the art academy, had to shapeshift and code switch in so many different ways when I'm working within white arts institutions and with outside of white arts institutions. So thinking about the mythology of the Aswang and kind of flipping it on its head as like, this is our strength. Like we're able to shapeshift and move through all of these different spaces and still be very strong. And then, as Arlene mentioned, I'm also an educator. So one of my huge initiatives, both as a teacher within educational institutions and within arts institutions, is to really make sure that the curriculum, the programming is culturally relevant and in a way that facilitates artist and leadership growth. One of the projects and work capacities that I am super proud of that's like, really underway right now is Ballet Creative. This was founded in May of 2019 to be a center for Filipino American artists in Soma, Filipinas. Within the cultural district, we don't have any galleries or studio spaces that are dedicated to our artists. So when we talk about culture being sustained within our cultural district, how are we going to make that happen? We don't even have permanent space for us. So that is something that we are working on. And we have been doing all kinds of programs to make sure that artists, Filipinx artists, can be sustainable within the Bay Area. And so, I'm going to pause on talking about myself for a little bit. And I want to get into the topic today. So why is arts inaccessible? And the first thing that I want to talk about is museums. Latanya Autry and Mike Morosky coined this hashtag, museums are not neutral. And so what I mean when I say this is that museums have historically served colonialism. So many of the world's top museums were established in the 18th and 19th centuries against a backdrop of imperialism. As European colonists traveled abroad, they would often bring curiosities or artifacts and treasures for the examination of display. This is most evident when we see, even for example, the Asian Art Museum, Buddhas, temple remains. Where do we think these items came from, right? These are not far off from what we saw at the St. Louis World's Fair with human zoos. These colonists and, under the guise of like imperial power, put them on display to be able to inspect and kind of like look at them as oddities and curiosities, and also to justify global exploit, right? And so I'm gonna play a video clip, and hopefully, let me make sure that my sound is on real quick. I'm sure y'all have seen this before. And so I'm gonna like just play this clip up until it starts to get a little violent. So we'll stop it there, but we'll watch this for a second.
Good morning. How can I help you?
I was just checking out these artifacts. They tell me you're the expert.
You could say that.
They're beautiful. Where's this one from?
The Bobo Ashanti tribe, present-day Ghana, 19th century.
For real? And what about this one?
That one's from the Edo people of Benin, 16th century.
Now, tell me about this one.
Also from Benin, 7th century, Fula tribe, I believe.
Nah.
I beg your pardon.
It was taken by British soldiers in Benin, but it's from Wakanda, and it's made out of vibranium. Don't trip. I'm gonna take it off your hands for you.
These items aren't for sale.
How do you think your ancestors got these? You think they paid a fair price? Or did they take it like they took everything else?
Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
You got all this security in here watching me ever since I walked in, but you ain't checking for what you put in your body.
All right, mate, let's have it. Come on, mate, time.
I think she might not be feeling too good. Hey.
Okay, well, I'm gonna stop it there because it gets intense.
Please. Hey, please, somebody come help.
But my point, right? Museums have legacies rooted in colonialism, and they need to expand the perspectives they portray beyond those of the dominant cultural group. This is loaded, right? How many times have y'all walked into a museum and felt represented in that space? How many of y'all have been able to walk into a museum and felt like your stories have been reflected right? So one amazing group of artists, a collective called the Guerrilla Girls, has been doing these amazing projects all over the world. And they're a collective of feminist activist artists. About over 55 people have been members of this collective, some very short and some for decades. Their identities are all anonymous, and they use humor and outrageous visuals to expose gender and ethnic bias, as well as corruption in politics, art, film, and pop culture. Um, and so these are some of the works that they have presented in the last few years, right? So they say, "Dear art gallery, selling art is so expensive. No wonder you can't pay all your employees a living wage." This has been such a huge theme through 2020, with a lot of the large institutions and even small galleries being exposed for the inequitable and exploitive structures that they hold, where the workers are not paid living wages and are often working more than they should be working, right? And so a few more pieces. Do women have to be naked to get into the Met Museum? Less than 3% of the artists in the modern art sections are women, but 83% of the nudes are female. This image on the right, bus companies are more enlightened than NYC art galleries. So they even kind of broke down that the percentage of women bus drivers are 49.3%. But like in the last the last image we spoke about, less than 3% of the artists in modern art sections are women, right? So that doesn't make any sense. And so Alice Proctor, who wrote The Whole Picture, the colonial story of the art in our museums and why we need to talk about it, says, "As an engaged museum visitor, your task is to remember that a museum is a box of things put there by a collector or a group of collectors and presented as complete. But we know that this is not complete." So she's asking us to question what is missing and whose eyes are we viewing the story through. And this is not to say that we should boycott museums as a whole. Like, museums as a structure and as institutions definitely have a lot of work to do in terms of making sure that the work, its organizational structure, the safety of communities is really responsive to the communities around them. But when you go into a museum and you are looking at an exhibition and you're enjoying art, I want you to always question what's happening there. And so if we Google American art history, this is what comes up, right? I know that myself as an immigrant artist in the US, I have history that is not represented here, right? There's maybe one image here that starts to talk about Native American art. We know we are on Native land. And when we talk about arts and culture are intertwined. There is not one without the other, whether we're talking about visual art, craft, music, dance, performance, any of those things, right? Ohlone peoples have amazing, incredible histories of art. And in this way, they're not always viewed as art, right? But we look at this ceremonial regalia and I'm like, this is amazing. This is a piece of sculpture, a piece of living sculpture that is intended for very specific community and sometimes even spiritual purposes, right? We look at all of their basket weaving, and this is so difficult to be able to produce and complete, right? I know that also with my own history in indigenous craft in the Philippines, right? Weaving is such an incredible medium that we really underestimate and we don't understand as fully as we should as diasporic Filipinx peoples, right? And so one of the people that I really want to highlight here is Ate Evelinda Hamja, who's one of the master weavers for the Yangkan people. And I was able to do some research with them in 2018. And I want to point out to y'all that like arts and culture is a layered spiritual process, right? So even in the designs, right? The patterns go in 4 directions to talk about the relationship of the human between heaven and earth. If we want to go really deep into like the energetic work, and I know that like, you know, Verma probably alluded to some of these points in her talk with y'all previously, but all of these traditions come from plant fibers, right? And so we think about the energy that is cultivated in these plants, right? And so traditionally, the weavings come from plant fibers. It's such a laborious process to extract all of these fibers, right? So not only does the earth do its job in putting energy into these things, but even to extract the fibers, it's so much to be able to kind of scrape the cellulose off to get the fibers in there one by one. So when we talk about weaving, there's already so much energetic juice that's happening in weaving, because we're not only drawing from plant energies, but we're also drawing from symbols through, you know, 4 directions, plant life that happens around us. There's so many things that's happening here. So also when we talk about textiles, it has so many functions, right? Some of it is ceremonial, ceremonial and can be for weddings, right? They are used to carry children, to hold your children, and some are especially even used in death. So are a few different death blankets from the north that this is an Ifugao death blanket. And one of the most amazing things that I was able to witness is the use of textiles in spirituality and shamanism. And so in Tawi Tawi, which is one of the most southernmost islands in Mindanao, their spiritual leaders, their mediums, channel different energies by placing different clothes on, right? So say a different energy, say a spirit comes into their body, they change their clothes, right? So even the spirit is being held by this cloth, by all of the different things that people are wearing, right? And so I want to point out to y'all, like the root word that we talk about with art, right? We talk about mediums referring to the substance that the artist uses to create a piece of artwork. So this might be photography, it could be paint, watercolor, all of these different things, right? But we kind of like backtrack on the root of this word, right? So a medium is an intervening substance through which impressions are conveyed to the senses or force acts on objects at a distance. Also, a go-between, an intermediary. We also talk about mediums being an individual held to be a channel of communication between the earthly world and a world of spirits. And so I want to hone in on that. This doesn't always have to mean like ghosts or ancestors coming to us, right? This could also even mean like your art being the medium for you to express your inner spirit. We all know that art has so much therapeutic use. We all know that expressing ourselves liberates us, right? So this is real important. How can your art be a go-between to communicate between your inner spirit and what is happening around us in our community? And so one of the things that I did is I took to Instagram and I asked folks what was the difference between community art and fine art. And to give y'all the high level summary of what folks responded: for fine art, art for art's sake, exclusionary in nature, but can possibly recontextualize for community benefit. Makes me think of sleepy museums teaching folks through a Western lens, classism and gatekeeping. The view that the individual is inherently more valuable than the collective. The process gotta be fine, prestigious and scholarly with a douse of elitist language. And so the thing that I wanna point out about fine art is that oftentimes it's a select group of folks who are educated in a very particular way that is defining what art looks like for everyone else. And when we talk about community art, this is how people responded. Community art is what the community wants to see, their input, created with intent and open ears, preferably by someone within that community, always feels more inclusive and accessible. Community art doesn't get or isn't viewed as elevated in the same way as fine art. And like my very good friend Alan Ocampo, who is in this room right now, says the existence of art is resistance, which I love that definition so much. And so when we talk about art, I'm gonna bring us back to this question: whose eyes are we viewing this story through? And to cite popular culture, who lives, who dies, who tells your story, right? If we don't write our stories, if we don't tell our stories, someone else is gonna tell them for us. And so I'm gonna skip this next slide, but we're gonna talk about Kimberly Drew. She goes by the Instagram handle Museum Mammy, and she talks about making art radically accessible for everyone. And what she says is, we have to redefine our ideas of success because there isn't just one art world. There isn't one art audience. And so how we privilege the multiple ways of making, and also with the respect of archiving and making sure that future generations can see, okay, we're not alone in the way that we make, and we're not alone in the way that we think. So this is really key. We have to redefine our ideas of success. And when we talk about community art, we have to let the community talk about what art is. We cannot define it for them. And so I want to spotlight some folks from within my community who I believe tackle this conundrum of community art versus fine art incredibly well. And the first one that I'm always going to mention is Carlos Villa, who is the reason that I came to the Bay Area in the first place. And so Carlos Villa organized a series of exhibitions, was not just an artist, but was also an organizer and an educator. And a lot of his conversations from like 1976 until his passing in 2013 addressed multiculturalism, education, activism, and identity politics with the intention of shaping a more inclusive world and art history. And one of his pieces that I love is, this is called I Can't Give You Anything But Love. It's called Where My Uncles Went West. And when he installed this, there's audio playing of a song sung by Manong Freddy, who was one of the original tenants of the International Hotel. And he was singing, I Can't Give You Anything But Love. And so in this piece, you can see here that there is a hat, like a fedora, which was really typical to see the Manongs wearing. And so a lot of these kind of like door-shaped geometric lines talk about the Manong culture and how they were always like in one door and in another door, and moving from Watsonville to Honolulu, from Cebu to Fresno. So talking about all of these like migrant movements within a lot of like abstract art. Another person that I adore is Anne Blumenthal, and she works with a company called Sky Watchers. And so since 2011, Sky Watchers has been bringing residents of the Tenderloin into partnership with professional artists to create multidisciplinary, site-specific performance installations that are of, by, and for the community. Okay, so she works with a lot of folks who are houseless or formerly houseless. And this is the thing that really gets me is in her ideology, right? She believes that relationships are the first site of social change. And these transformations begin with intimate interpersonal exchange, right? So all of her works are bringing Tenderloin residents into community with professional artists, and they're singing, they're dancing, they're creating films. And it's just such an incredible celebration of humanity that looks past status of being housed or unhoused. Another of my favorite artists is Sita Baumek. She is one of the lead artists for the People's Kitchen Collective, right? So she's an artist, writer, and educator who uses art as a strategy to connect memory and history with the urgent social issues of our time. This is huge. Every year they have been organizing these large-scale meals in honor of the history of the Black Panther Party and the Free Breakfast Program, and so many different layers of community organizing and arts coming together. Another artist is Leanne Ladia. She is incredible. She has like an amazing degree from Bard and has worked in Singapore and has been able to put exhibitions together all across the world. But one of the things that keeps her really rooted is that she has been working, thinking about arts as a tool for community engagement and community planning and mobilization. And so she is one of the organizers behind all of these Abacada flashcard uh, electricity boxes that are now featured in Soma Pilipinas. And so, you know, she's not the direct artist who designed these things, but she put all the work together to get the funds, to, you know, put all of the community feedback together to make sure that this could happen. And I'm gonna skip a few other folks. Just know that this list is not exhaustive, but there's so many folks in the Bay Area that are doing really amazing work that skirt and challenge the definition of community art versus fine art. Because we're running out of time and I wanna make sure that we have time for questions. But some folks here like Lenora Lee, Marshall Trammell, but one of the things that I really want to talk about is like, you know, in Daly City, you're doing it right now. Like even these electric boxes are art for the people, by the people, right? You get to go around Daly City and see these beautiful reflections of what it's like to live in this community. And so one of the things that you know, this is my recommendation, thinking about community art versus fine art, right? Where do I begin in making art for the people? And so I have a little ARTS here for you. So artistic expression and excellence expresses the emotions, stories, and experiences we need to tell through the creativity that is innate to all of us. All of us are artists. You know, we're all there. Rooted, relevant, and resistance. Rooted in our families, neighborhoods, and community, right? Relevant to our families, neighborhoods, and community, and expresses our families, neighborhoods, and communities' resistance. T for truth. Speak your truth. No one else is going to tell it for you. You got to do that. Storytelling uplifts the stories that heal, connect, and unite us together. And so that's my recommendation for y'all. As long as you kind of keep this as a North Star, you know, whatever you create, whether you put it within community art or fine art, if you stick to these guidelines, it's going to heal and connect and make sure that all of us like feel really represented and liberated through arts as a process. And I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna plug my my website, and if you want to connect with me on Instagram, and that's my presentation for today. I want to thank all of you for being here and open it up in case anyone has any questions.
Ooh, thank you, Kimberly Arteche. That was amazing. If we can give her a round of applause, everybody. I loved it. I think you really wove this whole story about, you know, and brought us into the topic of the day of fine art and community art. And what I really loved is when you defined medium and how you redefined it in a way that it's art to express our inner spirit. Right. And I wrote a lot of notes. So we're gonna talk later. But I wanted to open up. We do have some time for some Q&A with the artists and some dialogue. So if you have any questions or you have any comments, please feel free to unmute yourself.
I think the first one, I'm not sure if you're talking about aswang. Is that right? Did you mention that, Kim?
Yes, I did. I curated an exhibition that kind of took the idea of the aswang and made it applicable to our experiences here.
So do you believe that also in the Philippines?
Yes and no. I mean, it's hard. I didn't grow up in the Philippines, so whether I believe it or not, it's like a faith, you know? It's the
Where are
magic
you
of the
from the
stories that get passed on.
Where are you from the Philippines?
My mother's side is from Batangas and my dad's side is from Masbate.
Oh, okay, because that's the Ruas City is well known about that aswang. The Ruas City, yeah.
Thank you, Dory.
Thank you. Good job.
Madam Chair, may I say something?
Yes. Hi, Vice Mayor Justin.
Hello.
Thanks for
Thank you so
coming.
much, Kim, for that amazing presentation and really being able to bring forth, really what the importance of community art and just bring forth that dialogue around defining how really art should be for the community. And it's wonderful I want to thank the arts and culture commissioners who, even through a pandemic, are still bringing forth such special programs like yourself in this virtual platform. So thank you so much. And hopefully you get to do some work in Daly City. And thank you for acknowledging the work that's been done around the electric boxes and many more. I think, we have so much more opportunity to have community art in our city. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Justin.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you so much for having to inform us about this. And I just wanted to ask, like, do you believe the definition of fine arts will change over time?
I definitely believe so, and I know that it has to change. It has to change. 2020 has been a year of like realigning all of the things that happen in our world that are not serving the people in the way that it should. So I definitely believe that it's going to change, it's going to shift, and especially youth and new generations like yours are going to define what that means.
Thank you.
I just want to comment how much I appreciated your presentation, but I think there's one thing, and you just mentioned the youth bringing it forward, but I also think as like being from another generation too, like what you are bringing forth, right? So I appreciate that you're so unapologetic, like this is what it is. And so like I still think for my generation, I still think there was some like kind of trying to redefine, trying to find a space. For me, it was the murals in the Mission. For me, it was art from Central America and this movement, like with the the revolutions and so forth. But like to hear you speak in such a powerful way gives me so much hope. And for the generations to come and connected to the storytelling and retelling history. As a history teacher, constantly having that pushback, right? So I think all of these things intersect, and I think it's so powerful. And I thank you for bringing this today to the table, right? And hopefully things will definitely realign in 2020. So thank you, Kimberly. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nancy.
Hey, Kimberly. Thank you so much. I saw your whole presentation tonight. Can everybody hear me? I don't know if, okay, good. I just wanted to know if, as I was watching it, so much stuff was like, there's so much to process and to think about. And I was wondering if it was going to be recorded, or if it was recorded, or because I feel like I need to watch it like a few times over and over again, because there's just so many different like things you could delve into and ideas, and I was like, oh wait, and I just want to go deeper into it. Yeah, it was a great presentation. There was so much to think about. Thank you.
Thanks, Agatha. I just also want to shout out, like, Agatha is also one of the folks that's like organizing arts for the people, like, connect with Agatha in like the dance community. I do believe that it is being recorded. Yeah.
We have time to take one more question.
This is more of a comment, but I just want to say thank you for acknowledging like narrative, because I remember like when I took an ethnic studies class last year, it's really important to like aware of like narrative you're looking through, especially when you're like researching about your culture and stuff. I really like that you brought that up. So thank you.
Thank you, Gabby.
Thank you, everybody. So, you know what I really loved, Kim, was when you offered something to us at the end, and you had the arts, right? Artistic expression and excellence, rooted, relevant, resistance, truth, and storytelling. And I really love that because it really just pulls together your whole entire presentation, but also makes us question too, you know, like even as art commissioners or folks that consume art, right? And I love the questions of like, whose eyes are we viewing the story through? And what is missing? Like every time we go to museums, every time we go to exhibits or art shows or dance, you know, exhibits or dance competitions, who's missing, right? And so I think you really hit it on the head when we asked you, you know, fine art versus community art. And I love that you even did research through Instagram and asked the community, like, what does this really mean? Like, that's amazing. And I want to say thank you so much for blessing us with your time and your gifts and your love for art. And we're excited for your, you know, your next project. So please keep us in the loop, and hopefully one day we can get you into Daly City to do some artwork. And I've been trying. So hopefully through this pandemic or even after, we can get Kim's work up somewhere in Daly City as well. So I want to thank Kim, and I want to thank everybody for coming. Have a great Tuesday evening, and also have a great day off tomorrow if you have a day off for Veterans Day. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.